Good evening and welcome to the DebtCircle Sundown brief for 10th August 2026. Here's your comprehensive update on the debt markets, bond yields, liquidity, currencies, commodities, indices, and primary corporate bond issuances. Let's begin with the top 5 highest yield listed corporate bonds. Number 1. Monedo Financial Services Private Limited, with a yield of 17.00% and a trade value of 48.00 lakh rupees. Number 2. Unfins Capital India Limited, with a yield of 16.15% and a trade value of 250.00 lakh rupees. Number 3. Regency Fincorp Limited, with a yield of 16.00% and a trade value of 79.10 lakh rupees. Number 4. Monedo Financial Services Private Limited, with a yield of 15.80% and a trade value of 20.00 lakh rupees. Number 5. Unfins Capital India Limited, with a yield of 15.65% and a trade value of 8.60 lakh rupees. Moving on to the top 5 highest yield unlisted corporate bonds. Number 1. FDPL Finance Private Limited, with a yield of 16.00% and a trade value of 61.00 lakh rupees. Number 2. Casa Grande Beacon Private Limited, with a yield of 14.247% and a trade value of 500.00 lakh rupees. Number 3. Apex Homes Private Limited, with a yield of 14.00% and a trade value of 3,950.22 lakh rupees. Number 4. Trust Capital Services India Private Limited, with a yield of 7.8147% and a trade value of 150.00 lakh rupees. Number 5. Anand Rathi Global Finance Limited, with a yield of 7.50% and a trade value of 30.00 lakh rupees. Now, let's look at mutual fund debt transactions. Gross purchases stood at 15,891.59 crore rupees. Gross sales stood at 22,440.42 crore rupees. Net investment stood at minus 6,548.83 crore rupees. Net investment for August, month to date, stood at minus 23,851.25 crore rupees. Moving to FPI debt market investment. Under the general limit, gross purchases stood at 1,144.87 crore rupees. Under VRR, gross purchases stood at 475.54 crore rupees. Under FAR, gross purchases stood at 1,015.23 crore rupees. For gross sales, the general limit stood at 390.66 crore rupees. VRR gross sales stood at 98.00 crore rupees and FAR gross sales stood at 426.81 crore rupees. Net investment under the general limit stood at 754.21 crore rupees. Under VRR, net investment stood at 377.54 crore rupees and under FAR, net investment stood at 588.42 crore rupees. For August, month to date, net investment under the general limit stood at 1,375.90 crore rupees. Under VRR, it stood at 23.34 crore rupees and under FAR, it stood at 211.42 crore rupees. For 2026, year-to-date on a calendar year basis, net investment under the general limit stood at 57,813 crore rupees. Under VRR, it stood at minus 13,267 crore rupees and under FAR, it stood at 39,509 crore rupees. Now, let's look at the money market rates. The call rate stood at 5.09%. The T-repo rate stood at 4.99%. The basket repo rate stood at 5.13%. And the special repo rate stood at 5.00%. Moving to India government bond yields. The 1-year yield stood at 5.72%. The 3-year yield stood at 6.18%. The 5-year yield stood at 6.36%. The 7-year yield stood at 6.62%. The 9-year yield stood at 6.76%. The 10-year yield stood at 6.77%. The 15-year yield stood at 6.98%. and the 30-year yield stood at 7.40%. Next, the T-bill yield and auction cutoff. The 91-day yield stood at 5.28%, the 182-day yield stood at 5.55%, and the 364-day yield stood at 5.70%. Moving to liquidity indicators. Net liquidity injected stood at minus 224,196 crore rupees. The SDF stood at 224,228 crore rupees, and the MSF stood at 32 crore rupees. Now, let's look at the MIBOR OIS rates. The 1-year rate stood at 5.76%, the 2-year rate stood at 5.94%, the 3-year rate stood at 6.06%, and the 5-year rate stood at 6.25%. Moving to modified MIFOR rates. The 2-year rate stood at 6.90%, the 3-year rate stood at 6.94%, the 4-year rate stood at 7.02%, and the 5-year rate stood at 7.08%. Now, let's take a look at the currency rates. The US dollar to Indian rupee rate stood at 95.30 rupees compared with 95.16 rupees previously. The euro to Indian rupee rate stood at 110.10 rupees compared with 109.99 rupees previously. The British pound to Indian rupee rate stood at 128.66 rupees compared with 128.44 rupees previously. The Japanese yen to Indian rupee rate stood at 0.60 rupees, unchanged from 0.60 rupees previously. And the Chinese yuan to Indian rupee rate stood at 14.12 rupees, compared with 14.11 rupees previously. Moving on to commodities and indices. Gold, 24 carat, 99.9 purity, stood at 15,197 rupees per 10 grams, compared with 15,235 rupees per 10 grams previously. Silver stood at 2,450 rupees per 10 grams, compared with 2,500 rupees per 10 grams previously. Crude oil stood at 84.96 US dollars, compared with 83.45 US dollars previously. The Sensex stood at 78,542.44, compared with 78,499.17 previously, and the Nifty stood at 24,583.80, compared with 24,570.65 previously. Finally, let's look at India primary issuance, corporate bonds. Lotus Petal Charitable Foundation issued 1 crore rupees with a tenure of 8 months and a 0.00% coupon. No rating was provided. Prospera Health Corp Private Limited issued 335 crore rupees with a tenure of 37 months and a coupon of 11.81%. The rating was India Ratings and Research Private Limited A-. Lloyds Metals and Energy Limited issued 700 crore rupees with a tenure of 121 months and a coupon of 9.02%. The ratings were CRISIL Ratings Limited AA and India Ratings and Research Private Limited AA. Muthoot Mcred Limited issued 400 crore rupees with a tenure of 37 months and a coupon of 9.30%. The rating was ICRA Limited A. Purva Oak Private Limited issued 145 crore rupees with a tenure of 53 months and a coupon of 13.65%. The rating was ICRA Limited BBB. Mufin Green Finance Limited issued 50 crore rupees with a tenure of 16 months and a coupon of 11.00%. The rating was Acquite Ratings and Research Limited A-. And finally, Dar Credit and Capital Limited issued 15 crore rupees with a tenure of 25 to 31 months across multiple tranches and a coupon ranging from 12.95% to 13.05%. The rating was Care Ratings Limited BBB-. That's all for today's DebtCircle Sundown brief. Stay informed, stay ahead, and keep tracking the debt markets with DebtCircle. I'm Leela, and I'll see you in the next market update.